Hello everyone, Ellie from Matherspolitico here today with a very special guest. We have Mayor Georgina Oxley of the city of Kingston. Hello, Georgina. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience that is watching today?
Well, hi everyone. I am Councillor Georgina Oxley. I am the current mayor at the city of Kingston, at least for the next 22 days or so. Currently serving my second term as mayor, and 25, live in Chelsea and love Kingston.
Well, let's get straight into it. I know you've probably discussed about your path towards where you are now, but would you like to elaborate on some of your family story? What is your family story, and how do you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I suppose it's not a common story. It's not one where my family has been involved in politics for a very, very long time. I'm the first one that's really taken that massive interest in politics in my family. I grew up in Kingston. I've lived here my entire life, and as some people would have seen on my Facebook pages and those who know me, pretty open about my life story. My mum's a single mum, and I grew up here with my two brothers, went to school locally at Our Lady of the Assumption Primary, and we didn't always have it easy. Things weren't always easy for us. My mum brought my two brothers and myself up on her own, and she quite often went without food and struggled to pay the bills. And I think that's what's probably given me the values that's wanted me to sort of get involved in politics and help other people. So that's probably the earlier sort of life story. And what sort of got me involved in local government, I joined the Kingston Youth Committee when I was about 14. And from there, learned a lot about local government and saw some things that I really liked and saw some things that I didn't like. And it's probably an easy way of explaining it. My mum always said to me that if there was something I didn't like, there's no use complaining about it. You've got to get up and you've got to do something about it. So I did. Ran for election, and here we are 4 years later running for election again.
So that's a really inspiring story, because for a single mum, it's hard for any single mum to let alone raise a single child, but like 3 children, that's a big job to do. And look where you all are today. You're the mayor of the city of Kingston, so hats off to your mum for that one. And do you have any specific qualities that you gained from your mum during those hardship years?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And there are probably ones that I think of more than others. And whilst my mum and I don't share the same values, and my family and I don't necessarily share all of the same values, there are a couple that we really do. And one of those is looking out for other people, because we didn't necessarily have a lot in terms of material things. We didn't have a lot of money. But what we did value was the time that we spent with one another and those connections that you can actually make with people. And I think that's a big part of what drives me as a person now, is that I actually really want to get out there and meet people. I want to hear people's stories, because that is so much a part of who someone is. And whether, it doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, that story that you have is what makes you who you are today. And that's what I really value. So that's probably the main one that I've really taken, and what drives me as a person is other people, meeting them, learning their stories and learning from them, because that's what it's all about.
And I think that does come from, you didn't have many material goods, but you developed those human to human connection that is quite hard to build nowadays, because especially in COVID, we're in lockdown. We can't see anyone. We can't see any of our friends or family, plus social media, the rise of that. So you've developed that human to human connection. And that is a crucial element of being a mayor of any city of Kingston. You need that connection to connect to people and be relatable. So that's a good key characteristic there that you've developed through your earlier years to where you are now. So
and it is important. It really, really is. It's people that make up our community, and my community and our community helped us so much when I was younger. We relied on the help of others and my family. And I think that's what's so important, is that community. And that's what's generated my love for the community. And as corny as it sounds, as cheesy as it sounds, I just want to help people.
And it's easier, that's probably the right step in the right direction, and it does show with some of your very successful achievements under being mayor of City of Kingston. For example, I'm talking about the implementation of prevention of family violence action plan, which is really crucial nowadays, because back in the day you didn't really talk about family violence, and now that it's in the spotlight and people are doing something about it, that is a very crucial and very good step in the right direction. Well, what was
like we still don't talk about it, and I think that's probably the biggest issue still now in 2020 is we still don't talk about it. When I first moved the motion to ensure that family violence prevention was put at the forefront, there's some of the responses I got from people it's not local government's job to do that. Whereas we are the level of government closest to the people. We have interactions with members of our community every day. Of course, it's our job. It is our job to keep our community safe, to help them and to provide the services that we need to in order to make people's lives better and our community better. So, of course, it's our job. And I think that's probably part of the problem. We still don't talk about it in 2020. It's still seen as something we shouldn't deal with, that we just don't need to deal with. There's so many things like alcohol, gambling that all contribute to it, and we still don't talk about it. I think that's part of the problem.
I can sense you're very passionate about that certain topic. Do you have any certain experiences you'd like to discuss that made you passionate to putting through that plan?
I think for me, it's when I hear things from the community, and it's not necessarily my personal experiences, but when I hear things from the community, and I have conversations sometimes with residents who call me, and they don't call me about a particular issue. They call me just to chat to someone. And whilst I get, residents call me, they want to talk about rates or they want to talk about the beach, and they're all important. Sometimes I feel that I get the most from people who call me to chat. And when I chat to those people, some of their stories, and I go back to what I sort of said earlier about meeting people and engaging with people, hearing their stories, that's what I think drives me as a person to look at, well, what can I do to make our area better? We've got all the standard things that local government do, and of course they're important. I'm not shying away from that. They are very, very important. But when I hear stories from people, I had a lady call me very early on in my term, and she said, I've been involved in a domestic violence situation, and she went into all of the details of it. And she rang council, and council said, oh, well, we can't help you. Here are all the services you need to go to, and they'll help you. And she just wanted to reach out to someone and have that conversation. And I think that's at the point where I said, no, we need to do better, and we need to do better as a council to help these people. And I look at even just the change in this short period of time of the 4 years that I've been on council. I still get these phone calls, and I pass them on to our staff at council, and the assistance that they provide and that care that they provide for every single resident that contacts them in these types of situations is incredible. And just that change is something that has been so important to me. And whilst it might not affect me, it does affect these people so profoundly, and so many people in our community that we wouldn't even think about on a daily basis. It helps them so much.
And it's all about the 1%ers in the community. You've got to focus on the 1%ers, and it just makes the entire community far more beneficial for the entire community that way. And we're talking about that's a significant achievement when you're in the office of being the mayor. Is there any other achievements you'd like to disclose that you're proud of during your time?
There's heaps of things I could actually point to. Like the past 4 years have been not only an incredible learning experience, but an incredible experience to actually make a difference. There's one of the other ones that I'm really, really proud of, and that is looking at the disability access of council buildings, and that includes, our sporting pavilions. Scout halls is one that we've really been looking at. And this came from a mum who called me up one day, and she said, look, my son really wants to join the Scouts. He's in a wheelchair and he can't even get into the building. So we have to lift him out of his wheelchair, take his wheelchair into the building and put him back in his wheelchair. And they said, oh, he's happy to do that, but he says at the end of the day, he doesn't feel as if he's normal like everyone else. And that broke my heart. Like, that really broke my heart, that someone who just wanted to go and be a Scout like his friends couldn't go and do that and feel as if he wasn't exactly the same as everyone else. So very shortly after that, we decided that as a council, we would put money into, and it's not a lot of money, but it's something that's going to make so much of a difference for so many people, money into repairing all of our scout halls and making them DDA compliant. So that's putting in ramps, toilets that are suitable and accessible, doorways to make sure that wheelchairs can fit through. And they're just the fundamental things that should be done. But I think so often it doesn't affect people, and it's not at the forefront of people's minds. And that's why I wanted to get on council to change that, to think about those things that really do make a difference to so many people, and enact them. And we have. So we're looking at a lot of our scout halls now that are currently in the process as we speak, probably being worked on, and those ramps being put in. They're those things. They're those legacy sort of items that have been really important to me. Like, I could talk to you about all the kinders we've redeveloped that provide incredible education to the youngest Kingston residents, and they're all important as well. But there are those little things that don't make the headlines that are happening within the organisation and happening within our community that are so important.
And no one should be left out in doing anything that they want to do and that are passionate about. You always have to have those doors open for them, no matter what. And so that hats off to you for that, Georgina, because it doesn't get enough light, but there's a lot of talk about it, but there's not a lot of action on like council level, state level, and federal level to actually enact it. Well, from what I've seen, so that's probably one of the only few instances I've seen actually something getting done about it. And quick question, is the Cheltenham Scout Hall, the one behind the train station, is that getting redeveloped as well? Or
so that one's on the Bayside side.
On the Bayside one.
The train line, but I do believe they have things in the making,
that's good.
ready to redevelop that.
Right, good to hear. Before, we're probably going to get into the next section now, which is talking about your policies. And of course, luckily this came through in the mail, if anyone's received all that, and it comes through with all the policies. And so I'm going to read off it for a couple of them. And if you'd like to explain what they mean to people, to the audience that are watching, and how it affects them, then please do so. So your key heading is improving our environment infrastructure. And the first point of that is upgrading, improving the local cycling and walking tracks like the Long Beach Trail. Could you please elaborate on that point?
Yeah, so like our Long Beach Trail, particularly for residents in what was the Old South Ward, or is the Old South Ward for the next 22 days or so, it's a key piece of infrastructure down there. You know, I take my dog Banjo down there, and there's hundreds of people walking, riding their bikes and enjoying it on nicer weather days. But on days where it rains, there's a lot of puddles, a lot of unsafe areas with dips in it that don't make it safe. And going back to the accessibility for people who might be in wheelchairs, not exactly safe for them in wheelchairs trying to walk along there as well and be pushed along there and use that path. So it's important that, one, it's safe. Two, we have the right infrastructure. So that's drinking taps, that's enough bins so that when people are walking their dogs, that they're able to pick up after their dogs as well, and making that easy for people to do, as well as putting things like the dog poo bags along the path as well, so that when people are walking along, they're not stepping in things and whatnot. Putting in that lighting to make it safe so that people aren't hanging around doing things they shouldn't be doing. And also cleaning up the graffiti as well, so making it a nicer place to actually enjoy. So there's a couple of things along there, but just overall improving that path. Like, it's a great community asset, but there's some things that really do need to be done just to improve it that little bit more.
Interesting. Just a quick question off that. You mentioned the graffiti. Is graffiti a big topic that's spoken about on the council level? Do you think, like, is it a big problem in the city of Kingston?
Look, I think it's probably becoming more of a problem, and we're seeing it a lot. I think probably, and we've seen a lot during COVID, where people and potentially young kids have probably been at home, going out, meeting their friends still, and doing things they shouldn't be doing. I think you also then see, with the stage 4 restrictions, our officers haven't been able to go out and clean it as much as we would like to. And graffiti attracts small graffiti often. So it has become, I think, a bit more of a problem, which I think is that focus on making sure that graffiti is removed in a timely manner, you've got enough lighting in areas where it might be a little bit unsafe or might attract that type of behaviour, and making sure that it's cleaned when it goes up, because that's the biggest thing. If it's left there, more and more comes. So we need to clean it, get rid of it, and improve the area.
Interesting. Is it a costly process to remove the graffiti?
It's not a cheap process, put it that way. But I think it does improve, I think, the way residents see the area, going out and spending time in the area. No one wants to walk along. We've got a lot of laneways in our city, particularly in South Ward. No one wants to walk along laneways that have graffiti through them because they're not well lit or those types of things. So it's working through that process of prevention as well as then getting rid of it if it happens.
I promise this will be my last question on the graffiti, but would you ever consider implementing a laneway designated for art pieces and like graffiti or street art?
I personally love the idea. And I think particularly if you give people a positive outlet for those types of things, it obviously comes from somewhere. People want to be artistic. They want to show people their art. And while it may not be art that everyone likes, I think it would be nice to have areas, and this is probably going into another one of the policies that might not be on the fly that you've received, but looking at those positive outlets for younger people in our community, whether that's something like what's called the Rage Cage in Aspendale Gardens, where people can go in, play basketball, soccer, those types of things, and get out sort of that pent-up energy. Could be pent-up anger, who knows. There's been recently on Facebook, some local kids have created some BMX dirt jumps that keep being removed, not by council, but by Melbourne Water. Those types of things, those positive outlets that get kids outdoors, away from screens, doing things that they love, and making sure that, one, they're safe, but two, that they're enjoying themselves as well. And I think the graffiti part of that, giving that positive outlet in a place where they can do it, that is theirs, I think is a great idea.
I think, it's a very crucial part of, growing up. You always have you want to have these outlets. You need that. We have so much energy when we're going through our teenage years, and no matter what your creative ability is, we need those programs in place for people to express their own creative genius. So that's a good policy. We'll go on to your next one, and that pretty much leads into an outlet, and it's just basically providing new playgrounds and upgrading existing parks and open spaces. Do you have a specific park or open space that you're targeting in your policy there?
There's a number of them, and I think it's twofold. It's one, creating more open spaces, because there are areas, particularly down Bomb Beach, Chelsea Way, that do have a lack of open space. If you've gone down to Bicentennial Park, it's packed recently. And having those smaller pocket parks for people to go in, to sit down, to read a book, and just enjoy nature and the outdoors, I think is really important, and probably goes back to the finding an outlet side of things as well. But making sure that our existing parks are actually up to standard. So that could be things like, we recently approved shade sails at Victory Park in Chelsea, to make sure that when people do go down there and young kids go down there, that they're actually sun smart and safe from the UV rays. Implementing that in a lot more parks, because a lot of our parks don't have shade sails. Upgrading playground equipment, and there's a number of them throughout my ward, like Heights Park in Chelsea Heights, Amaroo Drive Reserve. There's a number of them that just need a bit of love. And they need a bit of love for the young kids to actually go and enjoy. Some of them probably haven't been upgraded since I was probably 5 or 6 years old. So they need some work. They need some love. And what I'd really love to see is actually the local kids getting involved in saying, what is it you want here? What does this park need to look like? We were recently commenting with a resident on Facebook, and they came up with the idea of having playground testers of local kids to go around, test some of the playgrounds and decide what needs to occur at their local playground, which I think is a great idea, because I'm not the one using it, so I shouldn't be the one making a decision on the equipment. It should be the kids.
Oh, that's an amazing idea. Imagine that, a children perfected park for children, tested by children, and obviously used by children. That would be like an amazing sight to see. I think even some adults will want to use that.
Yes, we can get the adults to test it too.
That's pretty much if that policy, any other policies that are like surrounding that, like providing new playgrounds, upgrading existing parks and open spaces that you're going to focus on, or is that just the one policy?
Look, like there's a number of things that I do want to focus on, and particularly when we're talking about the environment here and upgrading our open spaces. I think what we've seen during COVID is people have been stuck indoors, so they want to go out and enjoy the open spaces. So I think what that's said to me as a councillor and the mayor at the moment is we need to make sure that our open spaces are accessible, for one, and that includes our beaches, parks, everything. And that's accessible to everyone so that everyone's treated the same. We need to make sure that they're enjoyable when they're there. So that's making sure that we're upgrading our playground equipment. We're putting in things like enough seating, barbecues, those types of things for people when they get there so that it's actually an enjoyable place. And we need to make sure that they're safe. They're probably the three things. And looking at what we can do in those three areas, so accessibility, enjoyability, and safety, and making sure that all of our spaces do that. One of the key things that I'd really like to do, and it ties into another one of the policies of upgrading our shopping strips, is looking at how do we make it enjoyable for people to visit the shopping strips and make those outdoor places like pocket parks a nice place to be. So whether that be council potentially acquiring land in shopping strips to put in pocket parks for traders to enjoy, and we're going to see a lot more outdoor dining of traders with COVID restrictions moving forward. How does council assist, one, traders, but two, people visiting the area and people coming and spending their money to make it an enjoyable place to be?
Did you have any specific local strips they would be focusing on if you wanted to make it more accessible and more appealing to the eye?
I think Chelsea's probably one of the biggest ones, and that's not taking away from places like Edith Vale, Aspendale Gardens, Chelsea Heights, Bomb Beach. They all need a bit of love. Chelsea's one that we've been working on over the past 3 years or so with the Chelsea structure plan, and that's looking at exactly those things: accessibility, livability, enjoyability, those types of things. And what improvements can council make, whether that's lighting, more seating, encouraging better sort of more engaged nightlife there. So whether that be restaurants and those types of things, how do we make it a nice place to be, which is like brings a lot of benefits to the area, would increase house prices, would bring assistance to the traders, which is what we need, particularly in the economic recovery post-COVID. There's so much in that space that I'm really, really excited about. The Chelsea structure plan will be putting on consultation after the council election. So that'll be really exciting for people to get involved in and get involved in that consultation.
Good. Now we'll go on to our next point of your policies, which is, you've already explained it to some extent, which is providing better disability access to beach and playgrounds with all abilities equipment. Would you like to, I know you've already discussed the disability access to the beach and playgrounds and to, of course, with what you're doing with the scouting holes, but what does it mean with all the abilities equipment? Like
there's really, really cool equipment that you can get in playgrounds now, and whilst a lot of councils sort of shy away from them a little bit because they're not cheap equipment to have, but things like swings for people in wheelchairs to go and enjoy the exact same way that you and I could, that's so important to me that those residents in our community can go and enjoy the park, can go and enjoy the beach in the same way that everyone else can. And we want to try and make that as accessible as possible. So the all abilities equipment, even if, for those watching and yourself, go and have a Google of some of the all abilities equipment. It's awesome, really, really awesome. But that doesn't just limit it to people who might have disabilities, might be in a wheelchair. That all abilities equipment also, I think, extends as well to adult exercise equipment that might be useful for seniors getting out there as well and doing that exercise, still engaging in the community, because we want to engage everyone from 0 to 99, 100 plus. It's so important. So that all abilities equipment means that someone, whether that be myself, someone in a wheelchair, someone who's, my nana's 93, can go into a playground, can go to our beaches and access them in exactly the same way as everyone else.
And like you said, we've mentioned before, it's providing an outlet. Even though they're not teenagers, everyone will now have an outlet and no excuse to get out and be active in the parks and the playgrounds, which is an amazing thing for the community. We've got the next one is pretty self-explanatory, planting more trees and protecting our natural environment. Is that specifically talking about the green wedge as well?
Yeah, so there's a number of aspects to this one, and I'm sure everyone wants to preserve our environment as much as possible, particularly like the green wedge, areas of native vegetation. We've recently purchased a park in Chelsea that's full of native vegetation. It's an incredible place. So once it's open to the public, people need to go down and see it. But things like the green wedge as well, and making sure that it's not carved up for residential development. There's a whole heap of residential development throughout the rest of the city. Our areas like the green wedge that currently have farmers there, they've got egg markets, a whole heap of different things in the green wedge that we need to try and preserve.
Yeah.
Yes, I acknowledge that some people will say it needs a bit of a clean-up, and I'd agree with that as well, of areas that might be full of weeds that are on land that maybe hasn't been used. Completely agree. But I think we very much need to preserve it as open space, agriculture, and those types of uses into the future, not just high density residential development all through it. So yes, absolutely does include the green wedge.
Of course. Well, that's good to hear. We're protecting our environment for the future, which is a basic necessity in today's climate. Yeah. And we're going to your next section on your policy card, which is getting the basics right. And it says improving local traffic and street parking. Are you going to focus on like the parking near Southland, or whereabouts are you specifically aiming that policy?
Parking is a problem all over the city. I could be pretty sure that I could get a phone call from someone in any suburb of Kingston, and they'll tell me that traffic and parking is a problem. And that probably links with the policy, which probably not on that fly, could be on a different fly that's been delivered to our residents in Long Beach, but about inappropriate development and looking at whether developments that are being built are actually complying with the rules that are set. And they're not set by us, they're set by the state government, but making sure that they're actually complying with what I see as those bare minimum standards. We need to try and hold them to higher standards. So that's developments complying with enough car parking, which goes to the traffic and car parking issue. We look at particularly through Edithvale, Aspendale, Bomb Beach and Chelsea. There's some pretty narrow streets through there. There's car parking on both sides of those streets, and try and get a fire truck or an ambulance through there, it's near impossible in some of these streets, let alone residents trying to park outside their house if they don't have on-site parking. It's those types of things that council needs to look at, because we hear it a lot at council, and we say it a lot at council, and residents who have been to our planning meetings, we need more car parking. Quite often, though, council doesn't do anything about it. And I think, like most of residents in the city of Kingston, I'm a bit sick of hearing that, because we're going to get to a point where we can't do anything about it anymore, and it's just going to be a problem. So we need to work on it now, and we need to plan for the future, because it's not getting any better. It's only getting worse. So how do we fix it now and put in, like I was talking about that before, prevention rather than trying to find a cure when it's already happened? So part of that is the mandatory planning controls and preventing that inappropriate development in our city.
I like that. I do have a specific example, because I live on Broadway in Bond Beach, and it's a pretty much the first bit of it, it's just all units everywhere, like about 5 units on for example, like a 800 square meter block, and just there's tons of cars going on one side and on the other side, and it's when I'm driving out in the morning going to work, and then I'm trying to look both ways, I can't really see. It's sort of a safety hazard. Maybe that's just me. Maybe other people don't have that problem, but when you're looking, you can't see where cars are coming from. You just got to take the leap of faith. I might exaggerating it a little bit, but it does seem a bit of a safety concern. So it would be good to get that addressed.
No, and it's not an over exaggeration of it at all. I think that's probably how many residents across the city feel. And I feel the same way when I have to try and come out of my street onto the Nepean Highway in the mornings and I can't see through the parked cars, through the traffic. And, you do have to make that leap of faith of, do I just go? But then when you consider there's cyclists, there's motorcyclists that you can't see, there's cars you can't see, pedestrians, it is a safety issue. And we need to try and work out how we get through that. And I was looking at a dialogue that I was having with a resident many years ago, and we were talking about exactly the same things. So we actually need a council who's going to look at that and come up with plans, because currently people have, we used to do this when I was younger. We'd have stuff all in our garage, so we'd have to park our car in our driveway. If we had visitors, they'd park on the street because our car was in the driveway, so they couldn't park there. And it just becomes this vicious cycle. So what is it that we can do in the future? And part of that is those mandatory planning controls, holding builders to account. And they come and develop in our city. If you want to build here, you need to provide the car parking.
And it's pretty self-explanatory. Of course, everyone wants clear and safe parking. Like we've both got experiences. A lot of people in the city of Kingston have experiences. So if that does get done, then I think that will make a lot of people very happy, and of course, a lot of people very safe. And that pretty much leads into your next point, which is fixing the footpaths, roads, and drainage in local streets. Is there any specific streets that are lacking in these areas and that you want to fix them up?
I think particularly through Chelsea, there's a lot of areas that need drainage works. And we have a map at the City of Kingston, and prior to amalgamations in 93, 94, there was a map of the City of Chelsea, the old City of Chelsea, and the drainage. And there'd been very little work done on any of the drainage in that area, and the drainage infrastructure is not great. So we have a map that we look at as councillors, and we've looked at this map many times over the past 4 years. Everywhere north of Mordialloc Creek has these green lines suggesting that the drainage is pretty good. There's a whole heap of streets south of Mordialloc Creek, and it's normal wetlands, those types of things. A lot of it's built on what is basically wet swampy ground. So the drainage isn't going to be great, but mostly everything south of Mordialloc Creek has yellow and red lines on it. And that's been something that's been a real focus over the past 4 years, is looking at those areas where the streets are flooding with that so-called 1 in 100-year rain that's no longer a 1 in 100-year rain. Making sure, and it sounds really basic, but making sure that our streets aren't flooding, making sure that people are not having their front yards flood, those types of things. So we've had a record investment in drainage in our area locally, and that's particularly through Edithvale, Chelsea, Bomb Beach areas. Record investment, and we need to continue that because there's still a lot of work to be done in a lot of those streets.
And I think a lot of people will love more investment in making, even though it does sound basic, but getting the drains right and fixed. I think that'll make a lot of people happy as well. And that pretty much, and then we've already discussed your next policy, which is just preventing inappropriate development. I know there's probably not a lot of inappropriate development that's getting past your doors, because in the city of Kingston, but is it just just solidifying and continuing on that word of preventing inappropriate development in the future, or is it in a short time period than that?
Yeah, look, there is probably some that still gets through. And for those watching, the policy at Kingston is not everything comes to councillors. So there's a little bit of a misconception that councillors approve everything. And we don't. There's hundreds and hundreds of planning applications a year, and we would be meeting every day to look at planning applications if we were doing that. So some of them go under what's called delegation, and our officers look at them and approve them. So if there's one thing I'd say to residents, that is making sure that if there is an objection to a development locally, contact your councillors and let them know, because that's when we can get involved and when we can listen to the community. But if we don't know, we don't know, I suppose. I think, though, part of it is looking at, as I was saying before, those mandatory planning controls.
Yeah.
Currently, we have planning controls from the state government that don't really fit our area. Some of the areas that we've got locally can have 3, 4, and 5 stories that just don't fit. They don't fit in our local area. We're a neighbourhood area, beachside area that's predominantly 2 stories. So it's looking at those developments that then go off to VCAT and get approved because the rules say they can. How do we change that? Because ultimately you've got councillors who live locally who know what the community are after. We say no, and it goes to VCAT and gets approved. So we need those mandatory planning controls that then actually get held up. Otherwise, the residents lose out every single time.
Exactly. And that it does need to be addressed. Do you think there's this, can you do something about it in making it more those inappropriate developments that fly under the radar, so to speak? Is there more the council can do to like safeguard it, or would you have to rely on the residents to be aware of it and then bring it to their local council member?
No, very much so. Like, there are processes that we're putting in place, and we've recently started to actually review a lot of those to make sure that, you know, ones that potentially have dwellings more than 4 on a block, for example, that's a certain size, making sure that councillors are made aware of those so that we can look at it and go, actually, hang on, I know that street, that doesn't fit. But it does also very much rely on residents as well. And it is that bit of both, which I don't think is a bad thing, because if a resident who's living next door to a development disagrees with it, I want to hear from them, and I want to understand their objections to say, well, does it fit, does it not? I'm not going to know every street in the city of Kingston, so you do rely on that local knowledge as well, which I think is really important, because getting different views is a good thing.
Interesting. Now, this will lead to your last policy that's on your older version of your policy card, and that's getting value for your rates. Do you have any specific rates you're going to be targeting, or is it just in general?
I think, you know, so your rates card's made up of your municipal charge, your rates for your property and your rate in the dollar, and your waste charge. This year we secured a discount on rates to help people during COVID, because it's been hard for a lot of families, a lot of businesses. So there's a number of about $12.6 million worth of community support that's gone out, which is a great thing to try and help everyone recover. But I think looking at those basics of making sure that we do get value for money, and I think a lot of people, when they get their rates notice, go, well, gee, why do I pay this much? I don't feel like I get this much. And I think that's a perfectly normal, perfectly natural thing to think. So how do we give you more value for your rates? Things like the food waste recycling that we've just put in. So those with a green bin get a kitchen caddy, making sure that we're able to provide the compostable bags to residents for free at no charge. Making sure that we can provide a second hard waste collection at no charge for residents. And it's all of these things, even going back to the car parking, if people can get rid of their hard waste out of their garage, maybe they'll park in their garage a little bit more. Those types of things as well. But also just making sure that we're supporting residents, trying to lower the cost of living. I know what it was like for my mum when I was little, and it was hard for her a lot of the time to make ends meet. And there are families who feel like that day in, day out. And that's heartbreaking for me. So we need to make sure that we're not just every year upping the rates for the sake of upping the rates. How can we do things more efficiently, more effectively? And maybe how do we do things differently to even lower the rates some years? Now, we've still got to manage a budget. We've still got to do everything we need to do. But I think those things are achievable. I really do believe they're achievable. If we have the right outlook, we try and plan for the future, and we look at, we can't just keep upping the rates every year. It's not sustainable for our residents and families that are struggling.
Well, yeah, you have to, where there is a will, there is a way, and hopefully you guys in the council can get onto that and plan ahead and make a plan that is, like you say, very sustainable, doesn't put the like that pressure on the residents to keep continually paying increased rates. So if you guys can accomplish that, of course, it will make a lot of people happy, and it will make the community better for it. So hopefully you can get that done. If you do happen to get re-elected, and bam. So Yeah. Well, now we're going on to the next section of this podcast, and this is going to be probably the interesting one, with the questions from the residents. So if you're Georgina, if you would like to take a sip of your drink and get ready for some questions, we'll set off. First things first, the first question, I don't know, we might have, first things first, the first question is, why did you block the IBAC investigation and not ignore the Vic Road safety on the Beach Road bike trail?
So I'll start with the first one, the IBAC investigation, and I believe this was a motion that was moved by Councillor Gledhill at a council meeting. Could have been later last year or earlier this year. And the reason why I didn't support that was, in fact, that IBAC doesn't necessarily need referrals from council. If there are residents in the community or there are councillors who believe that there has been corrupt activity or activity that needs to be investigated, a council resolution doesn't need to happen, and our officers don't need to spend time and ratepayers' money to go and make that complaint. You, Elliot, if you felt you needed to do that, you could go and do that as well. Any councillor can do that. Any resident can go and do that. But I don't think that ratepayers' money needs to be spent to put together that complaint and send that. It just doesn't need to happen. If residents feel that they need to do that, go and do that. And if there is evidence of corrupt activity, I would encourage any resident to go and do that, because it's not welcome in our city and it's not welcome at the City of Kingston. But I don't support ratepayers' money being spent to do that, because it would have been quite a massive cost to go through all of that.
Yeah.
So that's why I didn't support that. I think the second part was about the safety audit about the Bay Trail. Yep. So the safety audit on the Bay Trail, when we voted to put through the Bay Trail, and this was with the narrowing of the road, albeit there's a lot of misinformation out there about how much of the road has been narrowed, and it's all built now. And to me and to a lot of people, the road's not that narrow. Perfectly fine, 2 lanes each way, still enough car parking there, and still a safe bike path. When we received any information from Vic Roads approved all of the widths of the road. It's not our council road, it's a Vic Roads road, so they had to approve any of the widths before we built anything. They signed off, they issued their approval, and there was no concerns raised by Vic Roads about any design elements of it. They raised issues about bus stops and the width of bus stops and where they needed to be. We complied with all of that, and ultimately everything was all approved and it was built. So it is a safe off-road bike path that's going to be a fantastic asset for the community.
Okay. Hopefully the residents were satisfied with that answer. We'll go head off onto our next question, which is, what's the definition of inappropriate development, overcrowding on blocks in Chelsea, for example, an 800 square metre block where you have numerous units on it?
Yeah, so I think the definition of inappropriate development is something that doesn't necessarily comply with the rules, but I think there's also a second part to that, and that's something that doesn't fit in with the character of the area, and the best people who are going to know that are the local residents. So there's some sort of standard measurements of one house to X number of square metres that we use in certain zoning areas across the city. I think what I'd probably say to that, though, is that doesn't always apply. And there are some times where the number of dwellings on a block might comply on paper, but you actually go down and you look at the site and you speak to the residents and you actually look at it and go, that doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with our local area. And I think that's what I mean when I go back to the mandatory planning controls that are actually designed by councils, because the state government can do it and they can apply these blanket rules to, some of the rules we have are exactly the same as over in the city in Wyndham. There's so many different rules for so many different areas. It's not about our local area, which I think is probably the most important part. Locals need to be deciding it. Councillors need to be deciding it, not VCAT, not the state government. And I think that's going to get us a better outcome on what is inappropriate development and what's not, than just having these blanket rules.
And then you touched upon that in your policies as well. So hopefully it does get changed in the near future. This is another question is, how do you cope with all the nastiness on Facebook and other social platforms?
Yeah. Sometimes, I'll be really honest, sometimes it's actually really hard. And I think sometimes people forget that I'm a person. I live in the community exactly like everyone else. I have a family. I walk on the beach. I go to Woolies and I go shopping at Woolies just like everyone else. And sometimes people have been quite nasty. Sometimes it's gotten personal. We've recently had to, my partner and I, take out intervention orders against people who have just taken it that step too far, or many steps too far. My partner and I run a business, and there have been times where people have just left negative reviews 30 and 40 a day just because they've disagreed with something that I've done on council. I always take the view of, disagree with me, we can have a good debate, we can have discussions like this. I'm more than happy to do that. I always have been. My phone number, email, everything's publicly available. But it is hard sometimes. So you've got to find those positive outlets. You've got to go and play basketball. You've got to cuddle your dog. You've got to do whatever you need to do. But yeah, sometimes it's hard. So I suppose my message for people is just try and be kind, because we're people too.
So especially with the business thing as well, like negative, like view bombing it. Like if people really have taken that next step too far in just like a council matter, then they've got some serious issues which needs to be resolved, and that goes for anyone for doing that to anyone. Just don't do that. It's not cool. And
be kind.
Of course, and if you've got a problem with something, just like you say, you've got your phone number, you got your email. You can always call up or email and have a good discussion about it.
Yep.
And so that goes into our next question, which is, this is a quite beefy one, and it is, why is your whole family running? Boyfriend David, his mum Pamela, and your mum Victoria. And I think the question arises from residents are seeing this as a conflict of interest. How can you guarantee this question is not a conflict of interest, and why are they running?
So I suppose, and I addressed this, so for those who are watching who are members of the Chelsea Hub, I did address this in a post. My partner's running. He's been on council since 2012. I was elected in 2016. In fact, we met at the Kingston Youth Committee. His mum is running because she is a passionate community member who sees some things happening on council she doesn't like. And my mum's the same. There are things she really likes that council's doing, and there's some things that she's incredibly passionate about that she doesn't like. And as I said before, my mum taught me, if you don't like something, it's no use complaining about it. You've got to stand up and actually do something about it. I couldn't stop any of them running, even if I wanted to. And in some ways, we're really lucky that we live here in Australia and that it's a democracy and that anyone can run. And that includes any member of my family, any member of your family, anyone can run and run for office. And part of that also is that you can vote for whoever you like. Yeah. So if you agree with my values, you agree with my policies, then you can vote for me, and that's your choice completely. And it's a secret ballot, and you don't have to go and tell anyone. No one's forcing you to vote however you want to vote.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it all. I think to address the conflict of interest part, a conflict of interest arises when there's a benefit or not a benefit to someone. So there have been many times in my 4 years on council that I've had to declare conflicts of interest. There have been development applications that have occurred 2 doors from my house. So as a councillor, it's not fair that I vote on that, because the outcome of that vote could influence me and my circumstances. So I don't vote on it. And that's the same for any councillor, and it's that councillor's decision as to whether they feel that they have a conflict of interest and their vote is compromised. I am my own person. My partner's his own person. My mum's her own person, and David's mum is her own person as well. We don't agree on everything. I can tell you that. We definitely don't agree on everything. We don't have all of the same values, and we don't think that certain things should be done the same way. So there are things that I have in my material that's going out to residents that members of my family completely disagree with, and that's okay. And there are going to be residents in the community that completely disagree with what I'm putting forward, and that's okay too. I think probably my message is that we are our own people. We have our different views. I'm very passionate, and so are the members of my family who are running for council. Have a look. If you want to chat to us, we're always available, more than happy to answer any of the questions that people have. But I think we're very lucky. We live in a democracy. Vote accordingly.
Yeah. And one question that just come from that, and some of the residents probably are thinking it, is that what can you guarantee to the residents to keep that transparency of guaranteeing that if certain family members do get elected into the council, how can you not allow that to benefit the family itself? In terms of conflict of interest.
I take an oath to the community. So when I was elected a councillor, I take an oath to the community. That oath is the community first and foremost, and I take that very seriously, and I'd suggest most councillors do. It's not to my family. It's not to any political parties. It's to my community first and foremost, and that's my job. And regardless of any of that, there are times where I'm sure anyone watching, you're going to disagree with your family members. And there are residents in the community who disagree with decisions I've made, and that's normal, and that fosters better decision making.
Yeah.
I don't agree with everything my family does, and I don't agree with all of the opinions they hold. But my oath and my pledge is to the community. It's not to anyone else. That's the reason why I don't take donations from anyone, developers, gambling groups, political parties, because I'm accountable to the community always.
Yeah.
And every councillor, regardless of whether they're members of my family or not, needs to have that. And if they don't, then they're not fit for office.
Okay, very, very strong answer on that one. And I can sense you're very passionate of getting your answer out to that one, because I have seen quite a lot of questions about it, and people are obviously worried, which is understandable. But there's your answer for that, and we'll go on to the next one, which is why did you previously campaign as an independent, and when did you join Labor? And so that's it for that question, that one.
So I think what was referred to, because I think I saw some of the questions in the comments, I think what was referred to was when I ran at the 2014 state election, and I ran as an independent because I was an independent. I was not a member of any political party, and wasn't at the time that I ran, and wasn't for a significant period afterwards. I think through that, what led me to join the Labor Party was because I saw a number of the things, and I saw the dirty politics, the dirty tactics that I'm experiencing now that I didn't like. And they were coming from members of opposing parties. And I found support locally in people who were members of the Labor Party. We shared very similar values, and I reiterate the same as my family members, not the same values. And I don't agree with everything the Labor Party does, but I think there are some real common values that I do agree with, and there are those common values that are community focused that I do agree with. So I was an independent when I campaigned as an independent, and joined the Labor Party a period after that. But when I campaigned as an independent at the state election, I was an independent.
Sweet. Good answer for that one. And then we'll go on to the next one, which is, how many matters before council have you brought to or decided by the Lady Party Municipal Caucus? Which is,
So 0. No matters that come before council are decided by a caucus in the city of Kingston. We don't hold a caucus in the city of Kingston. I can only speak for myself, can't speak for, any Liberal councillors that might attend their own caucuses, but we don't caucus in the city of Kingston. So 0 matters have been decided by a Labor municipal caucus.
Okay. And now we'll go on to the next one, which is probably an extension of the previous question, which is, according to Labor Party rule, Labor municipal caucus is not visible or open to the public. Is that true?
There is no Labor municipal caucus, so I suppose, in the city of Kingston, we don't endorse candidates. in the Labor Party. So there is no requirement to have a municipal caucus. We don't have a municipal caucus in the city of Kingston, at least while I've been on council. I can't speak prior to that. But while I've been on council, there has been no municipal caucus. The community comes first and foremost, always, and should always come first and foremost, regardless of what sides of politics you sit on. You're a local councillor. You're there for your community. You're not there for your family. You're not there for your political party. You're there for everyone in our community. So there is no municipal caucus.
Okay, good to hear. That will satisfy a lot of the residents, because I saw a lot of questions about that, and obviously you would have seen a lot of questions about that. This one's more of a fun-filled one. When are you going to tie the knot with your partner?
Maybe never. Who knows? I think it's, these days, I think it's very much about people being happy in their own relationships, regardless of what type of relationship that is. I'm very happy with my partner. We're very happy in our life, and I'm not sure it's relevant to my candidacy as a councillor at the upcoming election, to be honest.
Well, how to,
Good question, though. I appreciate it.
Good question. We'll go on. When
are you getting married, Elliot?
Maybe engagement at the end of this year. Who knows? So it's you never know. The next couple of years, I could be getting married. The same for you, Georgina, as well. Who knows? The future is open. And the next question goes on to, what is the number one thing that you're going to be focused on that you if you do or once get re-elected?
I think probably top of mind is, to take away from the frivolity of the last question, top of mind is that COVID recovery, because I think that's going to be really important for our community, and the first thing that the new council really needs to look at, because there are so many people in our community who are struggling, be that families, be that single mums like what my family was, be that businesses. There are so many people out there that need that direction, need that leadership, and need that support from council. So there's a number of things that we need to look at: supporting businesses with outdoor dining, making sure that they're not paying thousands for permits over the next couple of years just to trade out on the street, helping residents with rates, those types of things. That needs to be the focus first and foremost. There's a whole heap of other important things, and we spoke about some of those in sort of my policies before, but that needs to be the top thing for any councillor who is elected, is that COVID recovery to support our community and really, I suppose, improve our local economy as well.
Good. And that, of course, we need a good COVID-19 recovery plan, because no one expected COVID to come in 2020. And of course, it's probably a new sort of policy that a lot of campaigners that were going to think about policies like last year, and obviously yourself thinking ahead, it came very quickly, and you had to think of the top of your head what the best way forward is. So it's good to hopefully get a good COVID-19 recovery plan into place.
Very much so.
Another question is, will you stand for mayor again?
Got to get re-elected first. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but not going to rule it out. I've thoroughly enjoyed the past 2 years as mayor. We've achieved an incredible amount in our community, and there are some things that I've been really, really proud of championing and driving in our community. Being mayor, and I've sort of felt like I've missed it a little bit this year with COVID, doing things like citizenship ceremonies and meeting people. But it's a great experience. So if I got the opportunity again, I think, yes, of course, I'd take it, but got to get re-elected first.
Got to go. We'll cross that bridge when you come to it.
Exactly.
The next question is, do you have a concern for public perception of your family on social media?
Look, I suppose it goes back to the how do you deal with the nastiness on Facebook. I've copped a lot this election. It's been worse than any other election, and it is unfortunate that you get used to it, and that is probably the scariest part, is you get used to it, and my family are used to it. There are times where I think particularly people who are new to politics, and there's a lot of new candidates running this election who are just absolutely being bullied, whether that be by current councillors or other candidates. it's awful. And regardless of your side of politics, it doesn't need to happen. It's unnecessary. Everyone can be respectful. We're all adults. Everyone can be respectful and have respectful debates and have respectful differences of opinion. So I suppose, you know, we chose to get involved in politics, and it is what it is, but it doesn't need to happen, and it's very unfortunate that it does happen and that things get so personal. I wish every candidate well, but it doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's too much negative energy, and it puts a pressure on everyone who is involved to, you know, it's just a really downer. So hopefully people, next time the elections come around, are a bit more thoughtful, but we'll have to wait and see and cross that bridge until we come to it.
We said before, just be kind.
Be kind. The next question is quite straightforward. Are you Liberal or Labor? And
I think we maybe address that one before. We did address that one before. I am a member of the Labor Party.
Crazy. Next question is it true you were bullied in school? And would you like to talk about your experience about it?
I think I don't necessarily need to go into the details of any of my school experiences. I think what it led me to do, and I try and look at the positives of things, is when I was about 15, 16, I set up an organisation called One School at a Time that for the period that I was at school looked at getting, you know, your peers to support you when you were going through these things. So whether that's something as simple as calling out the behaviour of someone else if someone's bullying someone else, and I still do that now in politics, I call it out, because it goes back to that fundamental value of being respectful and being kind. You don't need to treat other people like that. So I have had my own experiences with it, but I try and look at the positives of trying to help other people through it, and whether that be in politics and helping other candidates through the vitriol that they're copying. It is an important thing for me to make sure that people are looked after, people are treated well, and people's mental health is in a positive place, because it's very hard to keep it that way at the moment with lockdown. So we need to support one another.
Yeah, and that's very true. At least you've done something about it. You're very active about it. Like you were setting up that, what was it, the One for Schools project? One school at a time. One school at a time. And you didn't dwell on it. You did something about it. You're very active about it, and I think we need more people to do that. It's easier said than done. But if we do have like those programs like you set up in place, and future programs in the City of Kingston in place to help children and adults, people of all ages, to see that it's not okay to be bullied and you can stand up for yourself and you can do something about it. And I think that would be very beneficial for the community, and it will keep being beneficial for the community. So that's a good response to that one, Georgina. And then we'll go on to the next one. And this is your lucky last question of all the residents and all the people that are watching in here today. And it came through as an email, and is a paragraph describing a lot of things. But the question itself is, how will you commit to ensure that there is a better education around responsible pet ownership, and will you commit to employing more rangers for increased patrolling of the beach to ensure a safe beach goer experience?
Part of the answer to that is we've already done that. And I think I went through this today with a resident who messaged me about it. We have recently brought all of our enforcement for local laws in-house. So that's parking, dogs, those types of things. So it's no longer contracted. They're actually employees of the City of Kingston, which I think will be a really good improvement there. Not only for local jobs for local people and less transient work of what we've seen during COVID, but making sure that our staff are accountable to our residents. We've also employed, particularly in a couple of hotspots around, let's say the EDFL Lifesaving Club is a good example, making sure that there are more regular patrols down there. It's not necessarily about fining people, but I think exactly as you said at the start of the question, educating people about doing the right thing. So whether that's something as simple as when people register their dogs, that they have to do just a short quiz and like a training sort of session that's a very short one for people to go through, and what are your responsibilities as a pet owner. I've got my dog, who you would have heard barking in the background before, and it's about making sure that your dog's on lead when your dog needs to be on lead. You're picking up after your dog. You're doing all of those things, keeping it away from people who might not necessarily be as dog friendly as some of us. Making sure that we're making our spaces an enjoyable place to be, not only for the people but for the pets as well. And there's that happy sort of medium of everyone enjoying it. So yes, I can commit to more rangers being employed, and yes, I can commit to an education program, because these are two things that we're already looking at to improve just that overall experience for everyone.
Of course, and it's a sort of a topic that it doesn't get really, like, personally, I don't think it's a problem, but some people do also get anxious of when you're not seeing the dogs on the leash, and even though you have off leash times, but when it's specifically on the on leash times and the dogs are off their leash, some people do get a bit anxious. Not particularly myself. Maybe it's people that don't really like dogs. So it would be good to create a better education plan or program and just make people aware of, the negative response that some people might have to it. So it'd be good to get that done and good to focus on it. And so that's the end of the residents' questions that we collected. And I've got one question to you, which is I ask all of our participants that come on the podcast is, what do you think of artificial intelligence? And do you think City of Kingston is well protected for a future of artificial intelligence? Are you thinking of plans to, for artificial intelligence?
Yes, and we already have some level of artificial intelligence that we're sort of testing at the moment in our chatbot. So our chatbot that's done in the out of hours, and it's still monitored during hours with someone sort of looking at the responses. But that's been so cool, and it's something that I think a lot of councils and organisations should be doing. Obviously, where it's appropriate. But there's some huge benefits, and the chatbot, I've dealt with it. And I've dealt with the chatbot in re-registering my dog, and it did all of that perfectly fine. Dealt with the chatbot on a number of occasions where I've needed to personally do things. It doesn't always get everything right, but it's very much learning, and I think at last count it was up over 1,000 new things that it had learned during its time. So I love artificial intelligence, obviously where it's appropriate, but it's pretty cool. So if you're interested, we'll show you the chatbot, Elliot.
Oh, that's great. If it's learning like that at that capacity already, who knows what will happen in the future? Hopefully, no one that does get elected or is currently on the council will have a power trip and use this, artificial intelligence to manipulate everyone. That's my biggest worry, but hope that's probably not going to be the case. And can you guarantee that you won't install CCTV biometric scanners that will scan everyone's face and give it to an artificial intelligence?
I wouldn't
computer.
Personally support it. I think that's why I sort of said artificial intelligence where it's appropriate. With things like chatbots, I think it's great. With things like tracking people throughout cities and those types of things, I don't think anyone wants that level of invasion of privacy. But yeah, I could personally say I wouldn't support it, but who knows what state, federal, international governments are going to do.
Has anyone, you don't have to disclose it, but has there been anyone pushing forward CCTV biometric scanners in the City of Kingston?
No, never had it raised with us. We get quite a bit, obviously, about CCTV in areas that are unsafe, but that's just your standard sort of video recording CCTV. Never about biometrics or anything like that.
Sweet. I'm satisfied with that artificial intelligence answer. Now I know I can rest easy. The City of Kingston won't become a artificial intelligence overlord, Big Brother sort of place to live in, like a 1984 George Orwell. So I can rest easy on that one.
It's got its place, but not everywhere.
Not everywhere. Thank goodness. Hopefully that doesn't change and we don't elect some councillors that all of a sudden have a power trip or get bribed, and then bang, we're in a dystopian future. Fingers crossed. But thank you. That's probably the last bit of our podcast today. Have I forgotten anything that you would like to talk about, or is there anything on the top of
No,
your
not
head?
not that I can think of, other than just reminding everyone, ballots will arrive next week. Remember to vote. Vote however you like, vote accordingly, according to your values and the facts. And remember to return your vote to make it count.
Sweet. So you heard the lady, everyone. That is the end of our podcast today. We had this is Elliot from Matherspolitico signing out. And we had our very special guest, the Councillor Georgia Oxley, who happens to be the Mayor of Kingston, who is going up for a re-election in this October, in this next period of the year. We talked about her upbringing, her life, and how she got to her position that she is in today. We talked about her policies, and we also talked about some questions that were raised by some of the audience members and some of the residents in the city of Kingston. So I hope everyone enjoyed, and until next time, we are signing out.